we have there?
We will see. Here they come.
Okay, great.
Good morning, everyone. I see people coming on in right now from the waiting room. We will get started in about just a minute, just to give people a chance to log into the session. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I know we'll continue to have attendees come on in as we get rolling, since we're right at 9 o'clock. I am so excited to be with you all today as we finish up the last day of our convening. Certainly having some of our best for last. All have been excellent. But we are just so thrilled to have Reverend Sam Offer and Dr. Carmen Rivera with us. I'm going to read a bio for each of them in just a minute, but wanted to do a couple of very quick housekeeping things for our attendees. So the first thing is, just in terms of your comfort visually, you can always close your chat panel. There's a downward arrow at the top right corner of it, and that expands your screen. And then you can always, and this is maybe just a general tech tip, if you press Control and the plus button, you can make your screen bigger or smaller in your browser. And that can give you a little bit more space as well, as you'd like to see both the presenter and their presentation. And this is Command and the plus or minus button on your Mac. We will have public chat enabled, but if you have questions, please be sure to put those in the Q&A section, and I'll be monitoring those. As our presenters go along, they have questions and so on. It'll be there in that Q&A section. So chat can be if you've got positive comments about what they're sharing and so on, but we really want those questions to come in that other section so that we can kind of filter those out. As most of you know, all of our sessions are being recorded, and session materials are available in the session detail. We'll have all those handouts, all of that information, all fully uploaded, as well as the recordings next week. And we will send an email to all attendees so that you all are aware of where for the next bit to see those sessions. I hope that you all will take a second to complete the survey at the end of our couple of hours together. If you go back to your agenda and you click again on this session, or rather if you click on agenda or on event, forgive me, and you scroll to surveys, you'll just look for the title of this session, Understanding the Value of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Volunteerism. We just have a couple of one-click questions, as well as one option for additional comments. So very quick. It's so helpful for us, so helpful for our speakers. So with that, I am thrilled to introduce you to our two speakers for this morning. Reverend Sam Offer serves as Vice President and Senior Consultant with the Washington Consulting Group, a multicultural organizational development firm based in Baltimore, Maryland, which was recognized as one of the top 10 global consulting firms by Economist Global Diversity Companies. Sam began his career in K through 12, serving as an English teacher for 15 years and a high school principal for 10 years. He joined the Washington Consulting Group in June 2009 and became VP in 2013. As a consultant and trainer, he has had the opportunity to work with many institutions, helping to foster social and systemic change in order to create greater justice and inclusion. Dr. Carmen Rivera currently serves as the talent manager for organizational development for the Division of Student Affairs and as a faculty member at Colorado State University. I don't think any of our universities play you all, so we won't have any comments there about any of our sports. One of the first things she likes to tell folks is that she is from northern New Mexico, and where she's from is fundamental to who she is. As a first-generation student, she earned her degree in Mexican American Studies and Spanish from the University of Northern Colorado. She then went on to earn her master's degree in Student Affairs and Higher Ed, as well as her PhD in Higher Education Leadership from CSU. Right now, she's a faculty member for the Social Justice Training Institute and a consultant in the area of social justice and leadership. And of course, one of her most important roles is raising her two super awesome sons with their super awesome wife. She loves 90s R&B. I think we can all agree with you on that. Traveling, doodling, and is obsessed with all things Frida Kahlo. So I want to give a warm Florida welcome to both of our speakers today, and I will let them take it away.
Thank you so much, Jovita, and we are delighted to be with everyone today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. As already been named, I am Reverend Sam Offer, and I am delighted to be with you to engage in this conversation of understanding the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that plays a role in volunteerism. And so we will spend some wonderful time engaging and in thinking about these dynamics and how do we increase our volunteer pool so that we are creating a more welcoming, inclusive community. I am delighted to be here with my dear friend, my dear colleague, Dr. Carmen Rivera. And Dr. Rivera?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm also very happy and excited to be with you. I'm coming in live from Colorado, so it's still dark here. It's really early in the morning. So as we continue to go, the sun will rise and come on in, and really reaffirming how I think that this work is about continually being in a process of growing and learning and being in practice. And so I'm delighted to be here with Sam, who I practice with a lot. We do this work together, not just in a consulting way, but we do this with each other, right? And so really loving being here with all of you all today. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Carmen. And we know that we are connecting with folks who are in Florida and who may be in other places. And so I just want to invite folks that if you have some warm weather and sunshine, send it my way. I am in Baltimore, Maryland, and it still looks kind of dark here too, Carmen. And so we are delighted to be with you in this way. As we speak about the places where we are, I am in Baltimore County, just outside of Baltimore City. I want to pause to do a land acknowledgement, and just because there is so much value in recognizing our heritage and recognizing the original homeowners of this land that I'm on. And so I want to pause to acknowledge the original home caretakers of the land that I am on, the Picasaway tribe. I pause to acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory, honoring and respecting the many diverse indigenous people who are still connected to this land. And I know there are many of our original people who are still a part of my community. And so I celebrate them as I am able to be with you in this way. I know that without them, we would not have access to this platform, this gathering in the way that we are today. And so wherever you are, I want to invite you to join us in recognizing the original caretakers of the land that you are on. And if you don't know, we invite you to please to, as a part of building a diverse community, it is important that we begin to think about who are those folks that were the original caretakers of our land, and how do we bring them into our bodies? How do we bring their heritage, the work that they did, into our lives, and understand that because of them and because of all that they did, we are where we are today. And so I want to invite you to do your research to find out, if you don't know, who the original caretakers of your land is, because it's so important to the work that we do. Carmen?
Thank you, Sam. Like I said, I'm in Colorado. I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is the original homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations. This was a place for trading and their home, and included a lot of other tribes from the area. And one of the things that's important to me is in my bio, Jovita talked about me being from northern New Mexico, and like the sense of place is really important. And so I know that that varies for folks who may have lived and seen lots of places as their home. And I still encourage us all to have a relationship with wherever we are at that specific moment, to know who all the people are from that space, from that place, because it has an influence on how we are experiencing it today. So thanks for that, Sam.
Yes, and thank you again, Carmen. I want to invite you, we will do some polls. And so we're going to use the Poll Everywhere platform. And so I want to invite you that if you're logged into a desktop or a laptop and you want to activate the polls with us here, to please do that at pollev.com/WashingtonCO908. Or you can text Washington CO 908 to 37607. Again, if you're doing it on your desktop or your laptop, pollev.com/Washington CO 908, or text Washington CO 908 to 37607. When you do those in either spaces, if you're not already registered with Poll Everywhere, it will invite you to register with your name and your email address, and then you will be able to complete the polls with us. I'm going to ask that you do not complete a poll until we invite you to do so, but that you prepare to be ready to do that with us. Thank you so much. And so I want to just talk about our intentions for our time together. And so our intentions is to deepen the level of authentic dialogue as we have this conversation about difference. And so as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want to deepen our level of engagement today authentically. And Carmen and I want to model that. We want to model some of what authentic dialogue look like. Jovita has invited you to do this along with us in the chat and also in your Q&As. And so we do want you to ask us questions. We do want you to comment along with us, because we want this to be an interactive experience. We will create a common language about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what these terms mean as we think about building a diverse community. We will explore, examine, and engage the importance of DEI at the individual and organizational level. So why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important to the individual, and why is it also important to your organizations? And so we'll talk about that as we're paying attention to, as we spend time in this session together today. We'll offer ways that DEI promotes a healthier volunteer environment and supports our communities. And so folks, as we're thinking about this notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want you to think about how it creates a healthier environment. Why is it important that we're thinking about diversity? Why are we being equitable? Why are we being inclusive? And how does that help us to do the work that we are doing as volunteers. And then we'll offer practical ways to advocate for and to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so many of you may be joining us today because you're saying, yep, we believe in the power of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It matters to us. And we're just looking for ways that we can promote it, ways that we can increase diversity, ways that we can be more equitable and inclusive in our volunteer communities. And so we will offer practical ways to advocate and to increase DEI.
Great, thank you. One of the things that we've been talking about and I've been reflecting upon in our preparations for today's session is the ways in which I have participated in volunteerism as a person who volunteers, as well as a person who has been parts of communities who have had volunteers come in and work with me and my communities. And I think one of the things that in my reflections was that I, as a volunteer, had to be clear about why I was doing it, what was important to me, what I knew about the community. And it was really just this like really cognitive reflection about that, right? Like what were the component parts of that? But when I really got down into a deeper state of reflection, I also was thinking about what I felt in those moments and thinking about what the participants when I was volunteering felt in those moments. And so the idea of me thinking about this experience and then connecting with what I felt with those experiences was really a really important relationship, right? We often, when we're talking about, learning new content or being in a space of learning, like in a webinar, we're often thinking from a cognitive space. So what are we thinking? And also that for me, that's like my natural default place is working on a college campus, being a scholar and faculty member, that's where I enter. But in order for us to really think about how we create more inclusive environments, how we can be in a place of comfort when we are managing and learning across difference, we have to have that good relationship between thinking in terms of what I know and how I can use that in that situation and how I'm feeling and how other people might be feeling. So really thinking about how we can have a good relationship with those two sides of this coin, right? So we like to include both of those things in our trainings. We like to offer opportunities for us to not only talk about what we're thinking, but also really push us to go into the feeling space. So we're going to offer us, how do you enter today into this training? I enter today thinking and feeling. Whatever word resonates with you most, please respond to the poll everywhere. You can just put in one word, 2 words, but really thinking about how do I enter today feeling? I was entering today feeling really excited and enthusiastic about starting my day with you all and about the opportunity to really have time to engage this conversation because it's such an important one. Great. So we're feeling open, optimistic, humble, right? Grateful. Yes, grateful is always a good way to start the day. Hopeful. Okay. Inspired, intrigued. Good.
And Carmen, if I can point out to folks, so as you're looking at this word cloud, the larger letters, the larger words are words that folks are putting in multiple times. And so these are just not ways that you're feeling, but ways that also your community is feeling as well.
Yeah, I'm also seeing overwhelmed in there. I feel that, right? Like we are living in a really, really strange time. And I'm a kindergarten teacher and a 3rd grade teacher. I never thought I'd be that, right? And so having kids at home and having all of this stuff happening. And so the context of this conversation is also really important. So I want to name that too, right? That we're probably joining this webinar having to manage a lot of things. And so really even more appreciative of the time that you're spending here in this space this morning. So what we want to say is that there's no wrong way to enter this conversation, right? We want to acknowledge the realities of where we all are, both in terms of what's happening in our world and our communities and our lives right now, but also based on what we know and what we've experienced around these conversations. So we're going to invite you to take a couple minutes to just jot down some ideas. Want you to write things down on a piece of paper, send yourself a text, but really think about this in a reflective kind of way. We want you to think about, in what ways do you think diversity, equity, and inclusion will improve your volunteer environment and communities? Like, why is it important that we have this conversation? How can this webinar, this time that we spend here this morning, improve that volunteer environment and communities? We're going to give you 2 minutes to be in your own space to reflect on that in a journaling kind of way. So jotting down some ideas so that you can kind of really connect into your own why for this work. Okay. All right. Hopefully that gave you some time to jot down some ideas. And if we were live and not in a 2D environment, we'd be able to chat about that, and we'd offer us time to check in with your neighbor and chat about what might be coming up for you. So if it feels like relevant for you or an option to you, we invite you to have this conversation with your other volunteers when there's an opportunity to have it in a live kind of way, so that you can have that interactive, the type of conversation, right, that helps us really deepen our own learning and deepen our own commitment to this. So we're going to queue up a video here. Oh, do you want to do the poll everywhere so we can hear some? Yeah, we did that, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
So let's put some sentences or phrases or words in terms of what you came up with. And this will be our way of doing this in an interactive way. So in what ways do you think diversity, equity, and inclusion will improve your volunteer environment and community? So if you want to text just some of your thoughts to that 37607 number, that would be great. That way you can so that you can participate in the poll everywhere. Make sure that you put in the whole phrase, or that this is not going to show up as a word cloud. It's just going to show up as a list so that we can see what folks are thinking and feeling around how this work will be important to our own communities. Thanks for that, Sam.
Mm-hmm. And Carmen, so if folks are using your phone, it looks like, yep, there it goes. Better representation of the community. Different
perspectives. Yep. More voices.
Yeah. Experiences.
Right. Yep. Especially if you're working with youth, right? Like, I'm a woman of a certain age, and so it's helpful for us to think about this, right? Provide safety, yes, for sure. Increase acceptance and understanding.
I love
Trust is
build
huge.
community.
Yep,
Yeah.
build community and trust. It's a huge issue. More awareness of other people's struggles. That's right. Like that's important. Peace and unity back into society and compassion, right? Yes, right. These are all really, really important. So what I'm seeing a lot of in terms of like general themes is it helps us build community, right? Because there's not really a homogenous community. Often we're not always the same as the people we're volunteering with. So building community. Another thing that I'm noticing is that we're seeing people in a more humanizing kind of way, right? That we are able to see how to build trust, how to use compassion, right? So that's a more humanizing experience versus this transactional experience, right? And so I think by us continuing to have this conversation and engaging in a deeper way around how we include diversity, equity, and inclusion in our volunteer framework, that we will be able to do this in a more meaningful way. So now back to the video that we're going to share. Thank you for participating in that. And hopefully, again, if you can do this in real life with somebody at some point, that would be super helpful, especially if you plan and prepare to be at specific sites or to work with folks ongoing. That would be awesome. So this video, it's a short video. Just have the question that we asked in mind, right? And as you watch the video, and when we come back, we'll have a brief conversation about it.
Open a door and it opens all the others. Open a mind and see what happens next. No great thing, no beautiful invention was created in a vacuum. It happens when we leave our comfort zone and come together. Embrace faiths, cultures, disabilities, differences. Embrace races, ages, ideologies, personalities, creating a tool or device nobody saw coming. Humanity is plural, not singular. The best way the world works is everybody in, nobody out. So who we're made of is everyone. Differences, not just celebrated, but essential. Many more women in charge. Equal pay for equal work everywhere. A new generation of Apple, more diverse than the one that came before. Open is not just who we are, but what we believe as a company. Because humanity isn't singular, it's plural. The truth is, we don't see things the same. The power is, we don't see things the same.
So we want you just to reflect on that clip. That is a video clip by Apple, as Apple was doing some diversity, equity, and inclusion work within their workplace. And Carmen and I thought it was really a powerful clip. And so we're going to just engage each other for just a moment. Carmen and myself will have a conversation, and we want you, if you are in rooms with other folks, and to have a conversation as well, just to talk about the impact of this clip on you as you watched it just now. So Carmen, can you talk a little bit about how this landed on you and what stood out for you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, it's not an Apple endorsement, right? So you could use whatever product you want. And so I want to just put that out there. But the thing that I really liked about it is that it was 68 actual people that worked for their organization. And that the first thought that came to my mind was that the idea of representation mattering. And so when we see ourselves in some place, right, see folks who look like us, or work with folks who experience life like we do, that automatically creates opportunity for greater inclusion, greater trust, greater community building, right? That's not a guarantee, but it is really helpful and really important. It reminded me going back to my college days where for the first time I went to an institution and I lived in a community where I was a racial minority. For the first time, I was 18 years old. And I remember being it was like I experienced culture shock for the first time, right? And so it wasn't until I saw other people who I thought could relate to my own experience that I started feeling more welcome and that I belonged in that space. So those were the initial thoughts that came up for me as I first watched that video, and lots of other things too, but those were the first ones. How about for you?
Well, I think the first thing that stood out for me is just the notion that humanity is plural, right? And that it's just not singular, and so we cannot exist in silos, right? If we're going to create a space where folks feel valued, heard, and respected, we have to pay attention to pluralism. The other thing that stood out for me that I love that was named in the video clip is everyone in, nobody out. And so what that said to me is that there is a focus that has to happen to create a space where everyone is in. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's hard because we don't know, sometimes outside of our own perimeters, outside of our own container, who we are, sometimes we don't know how to invite indifference, right? And so it's really important for us to think about this notion of everyone in, and that there is such a value to the everyone in. And that the last two things for me is that, no, we don't see things the same, and that is powerful, right? That we don't see things the same. I think about you and I, we've been working together for 10 plus years. And I think about the many times we're in the room together and we just don't see things the same, but the perspective, the beauty of diversity of mind, of our thoughts, of the way that we frame things is incredible, and just take us to deeper learning and deeper spaces, right? I know that sometimes we might wear the same color, right? And that's a beautiful thing. So sameness is good, but there is a power in understanding that that we don't all see the same thing. And then I'll wrap by saying this is the thing that I thought about as I thought about the 68 people is beauty. Beauty. There is beauty in diversity. And I don't know sometimes if we step back and we really pay attention to the beauty that shows up in our communities, that shows up in the work that we do, when we can look around and see diversity of minds, diversity of our upbringings, our socializations, diversity of race, diversity of gender, diversity of ability, diversity of religion. There is such beauty when we bring all of that into the room together, because I don't believe that the universe designed us to be same, to be the same. And that when we can hold the beauty of diversity, then we're holding the way we've been designed universally. Those are just some of the things that stood out for me.
Yeah, I think that what the video didn't show was how complex and messy it can be, right? Yeah. It did really hone in on like all of the greatest things that we will ever be able to accomplish, or all of the greatest things that we can dream of, requires us to be all in. And I believe that too, in that like we will only be great because we include more people, not because we exclude people. So yeah, the messiness part, you can't make it look good in a, beautifully curated video. But I think that that's also the other piece that came up for me, is that we have to also hold that there are multiple facets to this conversation and to this work. And I agree with you, like the piece was beautiful, and it reminded me that some of my most important learnings and experiences in my life have been because I have been in these spaces that have included people who experience life in ways that I don't. And so, I think that there were so many things that I can connect with in the video, and things that were missing that I feel are also important to my own learning and my own engagement in this conversation. So it was cool.
I think I appreciate that, Carmen. And I would invite folks to really think about, as you think about diverse communities, what are some of the things that you are noticed about being in communities across difference? And we'll talk more about this, but because as Carmen talked about the messiness, the hardness, right, of creating a community, because in places where there is difference is where we often struggle. And so I join you, Carmen, that there can be a messiness in that. And the messiness is not a messiness of like we're going in the wrong direction. It's just that we've just got to bring all the pieces together. It's kind of like doing a puzzle, right? It's kind of like doing a puzzle. You have 150 pieces and it's just all there, and you got to figure out how to make it all fit, right? And when you do that, then you get to step back and see the full picture and what is brought into the room. And so we really want to encourage folks to really think about, as you're developing your volunteer teams, that you're thinking about in what ways would diversity increase the beauty of your team, and what ways would it support what you're doing, and what ways would it make the work that you're doing better. And we'll talk more about the equity and the inclusion part of it as we continue in our conversation.
I love the part that you talked about a puzzle, because if I think about that and I only have my puzzle piece, my one little puzzle piece of my sticky notepad, that's my prop for puzzle piece. So if I only have my puzzle piece and it's like, mostly pink on one corner, a little bit of white on the other corner, I could think that the entirety of the puzzle is maybe a donut from The Simpsons, or maybe a fluffy stuffed elephant or something. Like, I would have a concept of what I think the whole puzzle is because I have this one piece of the puzzle. So this puzzle piece would be my experiences, the things that I've learned in the world, my own history, right? But it isn't until I pull back and start seeing all of the other puzzle pieces and all of the other ways in which things are coming together that I would see that, oh, my puzzle piece is not the way the whole puzzle is, right? This is contributing to a larger picture. And so being able to understand not just my own puzzle piece and what that means, but putting that in context with the other puzzle pieces to get a more full picture. And I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, in that I really only focus on my own puzzle piece and maybe my adjacent puzzle pieces. And I don't know what's going on for the rest of the picture, right? And so I really love that analogy a lot. And I think I could see that this video for me would be like an example of that first understanding of that first or second puzzle piece, right, to the whole thing. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think what you talk about, Carmen, that is really important as we're doing diversity work is to really think about how are the puzzle pieces bringing in different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you said about, I may pay attention to my adjacent puzzle pieces, right? And so the piece that came up for me in that is that often I pay attention to the things that fit for me, right? And so lots of times, if it fits into my narrative, if it fits into my way of thinking, if it fits into the way that I'm doing things, then I can invite that in. But how do I struggle with the pieces that don't necessarily connect to me, but are necessary to fulfilling the picture, right? And so it is inviting us, as we do work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, to pay attention to what are the things that are necessary to our vision in volunteer work that may not necessarily fit into my thought process, but may be necessary for the larger picture. And how do I bring that in? How do I expand beyond the adjacent pieces that allow me to see a bigger picture, right? And do the work to make it to fit. Because again, as you said, it's messy. So there is work that has to happen to make all of these pictures fit, all of these pieces fit. Yeah. So I think as we think about this, we're going to take a break in a moment, and I think what I want to do, Carmen, is let's just do a little bit of language here. Let's take this 5 minutes and just talk about language and invite folks to just if you are using the chat box. And Jovita, if folks are putting questions in, please feel free to interrupt us to ask those questions. We're okay with that. When you think about the word diversity, what comes to mind, right? And so lots of people, when we think about diversity, they think about, often it is associated with race, with skin tone. And what we want folks to hold is that when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about much more than race. While race is a part of diversity, skin tone is a part of diversity. When we're talking about diversity, we're talking about difference. How is difference showing up? What does difference look like? And that can be difference in the way that we think, right? In our thought process, or often when we talk about left hand and right hand, that is diversity, right? When we talk about the ways that we do things, when we talk about gender, when we talk about, again, religion, what are our religious beliefs that informs how I show up and do what I do? And so when I think about how my religion informs Sam Offer, someone else may have had a different religious experience that informs who they are. And both of those are needed as we're doing volunteer work, because we will meet people who will be able to connect to me, or folks that will be able to connect to someone else. And so when we think about diversity, think about difference. What I like to think about is a box of crayons. And I remember when I was in the 3rd grade and I got my first box of crayons, 96 crayons. Oh my God, it was so phenomenal, because I went from the 8 to the 12 to the 24. And then my parents brought me 96 crayons, and I was fascinated by the multitude of colors and different colors that was there. And so when I think about diversity, I think about that we might experience it at one place at this level, but it's ever evolving. It's ever evolving. It's the way that difference shows up all the time in our lives. Then we think about this notion of equity. And so when we think about equity, we think about fairness. And I often use the analogy around shoes. And so we can give everybody a pair of shoes. So if I gave everybody a size 3 child shoe, right? Everybody would have shoes, but the problem would be that it wouldn't be fair because the shoes don't fit. And so we have to think about, how is fairness showing up? And fairness shows up in, if I'm going to give everyone shoes, that I'm paying attention to the size that everyone needs so that the shoes fit. When I look at equity, I take it a step further and I pay attention to also, well, what about people who don't need shoes? So what do they need? So that I can be equitable to meet their needs, so that in doing your volunteer work, we're setting folks up to be successful. So equity gets to fairness, and that fairness gets to successfulness. And then when we talk about inclusion, I like to think of inclusion as a sense of belonging, a place where people feel valued, heard, validated, and respected. And so when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, we're talking about how is difference present and how are we being fair in treating how difference present itself, making sure folks have what they need so that they can be their best self in the work that they're doing. And so that in the work that they're doing, particularly as volunteers, as Carmen started out early in this conversation, is that folks feel valued. Folks feel heard, folks feel respected, folks feel included in a way that they will show up being their best selves in doing the work that they're doing from day to day. Carmen, are there any ads that you want to add to that before we take a break?
That's great. Yeah, I think we're good.
Thank you. Thank you. And so we're going to pause here and we're going to invite you to take a 15-minute break. And then we'll come back together at 10 o'clock and we will finish our conversation together. We're hoping that this is being helpful to you as we continue on this journey together for the rest of our time. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful. And you all, so we're done with this particular session. So we will go, you all will click on the second session for the continuation of what the Reverend Offer and Dr. Rivera have been sharing with us. So we'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you.